Alright, what is going on, guys? EGM coming at you with a brand new video, and today I'm going to be doing my season preview for the Washington Redskins. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Last year, the Redskins finished with a record of 8 wins, 7 losses, and 1 tie. They actually did tie in the regular season against the Cincinnati Bengals. They finished 3rd in the NFC East and missed the playoffs. Now, the Washington Redskins were actually still in playoff contention. They were in contention for a wild card spot before they lost in Week 17 to the New York Giants. But to be fair, Washington did have a pretty difficult schedule. They played against a total of 7 playoff teams, 4 games total against the Dallas Cowboys and New York Giants, being that they play them twice every year. They played Green Bay, Detroit, and Pittsburgh, all teams that made the playoffs last year. And in those 7 games, they finished with a record of 2-5. But although Washington did have a disappointing season in the matter that they did not make the playoffs, they do have some pretty solid players on their football team that we're going to get into. So let's start with the offense and its strengths. We're going to start off with the quarterback position. Kirk Cousins had a really good season last year. He threw for just about 5,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. They found a pretty solid running back in Robert Kelly, who was a leading rusher, ran for over 700 yards, 6 touchdowns, and also saw some contributions from other backs like Matt Jones, the rookie out of Florida, and Chris Thompson. Now let's talk about the receiving game. They had 2 receivers go for over 1,000 yards in Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson, and a tight end in Jordan Reed that, when healthy, is definitely a top 5 tight end. Jordan Reed had 686 reception yards last year, 6 touchdowns, and this was an offense that also saw Jamison Crowder go for about 850 yards and 7 touchdowns. So like I said, this team was really good in terms of passing. As a matter of fact, they were ranked 2nd in the league in terms of passing offense. Now, as for their run game, it wasn't nearly as strong as their passing attack, as they ranked 21st in terms of rush, but they were ranked 3rd in terms of total offense. So this is a pretty dang good offense. But coming into the 2017 NFL season, they did make some changes on that side of the ball. Their 2 leading receivers in Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon are no longer there. They both left in free agency. But what do you do when you lose a couple 1,000-yard receivers? You go and you sign another one. So they brought in Terrelle Pryor Sr. from the Cleveland Browns, who was a former quarterback, made the change to wide receiver, and was very productive last year. So they brought him in. It should give Kirk Cousins another vertical threat down the field, which should complement Jamison Crowder pretty well. I mean, Terrelle Pryor is a big physical receiver that likes to run down the field. Jamison Crowder fits more so in the slot and really excels at running those underneath short routes. But I'm not necessarily ready to call this receiving core a strength, because there is still going to be a void on the other side of the field across from Terrelle Pryor. Now, the expectations are that Redskins' second-year receiver Josh Dotson, that they drafted last year out of TCU, is going to be an X factor in this coming season. Whether or not he's able to produce at the level at which they expected him to produce when they drafted him. But another position that I do consider a strength is at the tight end position, Jordan Reed. The only thing is that Jordan Reed needs to be healthy, because as I said earlier, Jordan Reed is a top 5 tight end, maybe top 3 when he is healthy, and he is of great usage to a guy like Kirk Cousins that likes to sling the ball down the field. He's a big, fast, physical tight end that can go up and make aggressive catches. And finally, the last strength on this offense is the offensive line, led by 2 great offensive tackles in Trent Williams and Brandon Scherf. Now, this line was actually ranked the 4th best offensive line in the entire football league last season. This is a really solid offensive line. But now let's move on to the defense. Last year, some of the defensive leaders on this team included Mason Foster, who led the team with 124 total tackles, and Ryan Kerrigan, who is one of the premier pass rushers in this league, who last season racked up a total of 11 sacks, and cornerbacks Brashad Breeland and Josh Norman both had 3 interceptions apiece. So now that I gave you some of the leaders on that side of the ball, let's talk a little more about the strengths and weaknesses of this defense coming into this season. Now, let's start off with the strengths. One of the first strengths on this defense is the defensive line. Now, in free agency, they lost their best D lineman in Chris Baker, but they brought in Terrell McClain from the Dallas Cowboys, who showed some flashes last year of being able to clog up the holes, stop the run. They brought in Stacy McGee as well from the Oakland Raiders. So even with the loss of Chris Baker, they did add some nice depth. They still have Ziggy Hood, who was at times pretty disruptive last season. And also, the Redskins ended up using their 1st-round draft pick this past draft on Jonathan Allen, the defensive tackle out of Alabama. So they do have some solid players on this defensive line, and enough good players, enough talent for this defensive line to be considered a strength on the defensive side of the football. Another strength on this defense would be the cornerback position. And even though the secondary was ranked 28th against the pass last season, they have some nice players. They got Josh Norman, who made the move over from Carolina in last year's offseason, and they have Brashad Breeland, who both guys chipped in with 3 interceptions apiece last year. and makes for a pretty solid tandem. They have some good depth as well. They still have Kendall Fuller, who they drafted in the 2016 NFL draft, but he was injured for a majority of his rookie season, so he's coming back. They also have Quinton Dunbar, who seems to have some potential. He's a former receiver, I believe, made the conversion to cornerback. They believe that he can be a pretty good player as a cornerback. And in this past draft, they used their 3rd round pick to select Fabian Moreau, cornerback out of UCLA. Now, Josh Norman didn't have as good a season as he had when he was with the Carolina Panthers, but that's okay. I think in this second year, he's going to get used to the system. I think he's going to feel more comfortable, and I think he's going to make some plays and eventually become a lockdown corner that we all expected him to be once he left the Panthers. Now, those are the 2 strengths on this defense. Let's get into the weaknesses. Now, the first weakness that I want to point out is obviously the safety positions. They have D'Angelo Hall on the roster. He's a former cornerback that made the switch over to the safety, but he's 33 years old. He's not going to be that productive for much longer. As a matter of fact, he's currently on the PUP list, so he's injured right now. Now, the expected starters coming into this season are Sua Cravens, who was a rookie last year that they drafted out of USC. And they also brought in a journeyman, DJ Swearinger, who's played with multiple teams already. So DJ Swearinger is going to be playing at the free safety position. Sua Cravens is going to be playing at the strong safety position. But we know what we're getting with DJ Swearinger. We've seen what he can do. He's not great. Right now, Sua Cravens is a bit more of a question mark because last year he played a variety of different roles. Now, when the Redskins drafted him, they were planning on using him in sort of a hybrid role, the same way the Arizona Cardinals used Deion Buchanan as a safety / linebacker. Because coming out of college, Sua Cravens didn't really have a set position. Now, if he's named the starter for the strong safety position, that means he's going to have to settle down, he's going to have to study, and he's going to have to learn that position. So you have a journeyman starting on one side and an inexperienced strong safety, and that's why I think that this safety positions is a weakness for this defense. Now, another weakness on this football team is the linebacking core in general. Now, let's start with the outside linebackers. You have a beast in Ryan Kerrigan, who just recorded 11 sacks last year. He's excellent coming off the edge. And Trent Murphy, the 4th year man, had a solid season himself. He recorded 9 sacks last year, but coming into this season, he was going to be suspended for the first 4 games due to a PED violation. And a few days ago in the preseason opener, he actually got injured, and it turns out that he's gonna miss the entire season. So that leaves a void on the other side of Ryan Kerrigan. So with Trent Murphy out, the Redskins are gonna have to see Preston Smith and the rookie outside linebacker Ryan Anderson that they drafted in this past draft in the 2nd round out of Alabama. They're gonna have to see some production from both those guys in the absence of Trent Murphy. Now let's move on to the middle linebackers, the inside linebackers. Now the inside linebackers aren't as much of a weakness as the outside linebacker position on this team. They have some pretty solid starters in Mason Foster and Will Compton, who both totaled over 100 total tackles last year. They signed a veteran in Zach Brown from the Buffalo Bills this past free agency, who was coming off a Pro Bowl year. So the middle linebackers isn't really a weakness, neither is it a strength. They don't really have the athleticism that some of these other linebacking cores have in the NFL. So I would say that this middle linebacking core is good enough and should be able to hold up pretty well throughout this season. So with that being said, let's get into the schedule predictions. Now the Redskins actually have the 7th hardest schedule coming into this season. But I mean, you got a slinger at the quarterback position, and in this pass-heavy league, I think you guys should be all right. So let's see. In week 1, you guys had the Philadelphia Eagles. I think you guys win that game. I think you guys beat the Los Angeles Rams, start off the season 2-0, and then you lose 2 straight to Oakland and Kansas City. You head into the bye, you come back. I think you guys beat the 49ers, lose to the Eagles. I think you guys beat the Cowboys, and then lose to Seattle. So halfway through the season, I have you guys going 4-4, and then you guys play the Vikings. I think the Redskins beat the Vikings. Next up, you guys play the Saints. I think the Redskins beat the Saints. I think they lose to the Giants and then lose to the Cowboys. They beat the Chargers. They beat Arizona, and I think they beat Denver. And then they close out the season with a loss and finish the season 9-7. And one of my bold predictions is actually that they're gonna miss the playoffs with that loss in the final week to the New York Giants. So I see you guys finishing the season at 9-7 and just missing the playoffs. If you like these predictions, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content.